Mm. So Hare Krishna, we will welcome to our Gita Gyan. This is now week 4, and first 3 weeks we discussed a special topic about the Vedic literatures, about how the various, the length and breadth of the Vedic literatures, and about how Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is basically the essence of all of that. And now this is week 4. We will continue with our understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, and we are going to discuss based on the Gita Mahatmya. So let's begin with some prayer first. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vikna Vinasha Narasimhaiti Namini Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayatim Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Mande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanyam Ishwaram Om Tatsat Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Tatsat. So welcome everybody. So this is our Gita Gyan. We are continuing, and for week 4 we are going to begin the glories of the Bhagavad. We are going to begin discussing about the glories of the Bhagavad Gita as mentioned in Padma Purana. So Padma Purana is in Padma Purana, in the Uttarakanda section, chapters 175 to 192, there is a conversation that takes place between Lord Shiva and Parvati. And in this conversation, chapter by chapter, the glory of the Bhagavad Gita is given, and it's given in a story form. So we can understand the glory of each chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in story form. Very interesting stories, and we can learn many things, many instructions, many lessons, understandings from these stories. So we are going to go through this chapter by chapter, And also we will, at the end of this story, we will, after discussing the lessons and all that, we will talk about the summary of chapter 1 Bhagavad-Gita. Since we are discussing Gita chapter 1, we will just talk about what is in the Gita in summary, what we have discussed previously in level 1. A bit more deeper. And also after that, if time allows, we will have some practical spirituality, day-to-day practical spirituality, and some understanding, practical understanding on how we can take our spirituality a level further. Okay, so with Gita Mahatmya, this conversation begins like this. So Goddess Parvati said to Lord Shiva, "My dear husband, you know all the transcendental truths, and by your mercy, I have heard the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna." So Parvati Devi has heard the glory of the Supreme Lord from Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva has been glorifying Narayana and Krishna to Parvati. So now Parvati is asking, "Oh Lord, now I long to hear from you the glories of the Srimad Bhagavad-Gita, which was spoken by Lord Krishna, and by hearing which one's devotion to Krishna increases." So, and after hearing this, Lord Shiva replies to Mother Parvati. She says, "Oh, that person whose body is the color of dark rain cloud, whose carrier is the king of birds, Garuda, and who is lying on Anantasesha, the thousand-headed serpent, that's Sri Vishnu, whose glories have no limit, I am always meditating." So Lord Shiva begins with the invocation to Lord Vishnu, and then he continues. So here I'm just putting a picture. This is the description given by Lord Shiva. That person who is lying down on Anantasesha. So here, this is a deity, very, very old deity. This deity is in Nepal, and in the temple of Buddha Nilakanta. So Buddha Nilakanta temple is in Nepal. It's a Vishnu temple. And over there, you have this very special deity. You would not see this deity anywhere in the world. Of course, in Ranganath, there is also a deity of Lord Vishnu lying down on Anantasesha, but that pose is slightly different. He's like lying down and his head is lifted. He's lying on his shoulder, elbows propped up. Here, he's completely lying down. So this is a very unique deity. It's a very big deity. The person, it's like a small bug or a small beetle. Imagine the size of a beetle. That is the size of the person if they were to stand next to this deity. It's a very large deity. It's on the water in a pond in the temple. So it's it's said that this deity is 1,400 years old. Very old temple. So this is the Buddha Nilakanta. So I'm just showing. Here's another more recent picture taken in recent times. You can see very, very large deity. So anyway, Lord Shiva continues, "My dear Parvati, once after Sri Vishnu had killed the demon Mura, he was resting peacefully on Anantasesha, just like this. And then when the bestower of all good fortune of the universe, Sri Lakshmi, respectfully inquired from him." So Lord Shiva is telling Parvati of another conversation that took place between Lord Vishnu and Lakshmi Devi. And he's recounting that conversation. So here's another picture of, this is Sri Rangam, Sri Ranganath Swami, also a very large deity. And Lakshmi is there. So then Sri Vishnu said, in that conversation, Vishnu was telling Lakshmi, "My dear Lakshmi, I am not sleeping, but I am watching how wonderfully my energy is working. It is by this wonderful energy of mine by which I am controlling all things, and yet I remain separate." So here Vishnu is telling his Achintya Shakti, how everything is working under his direction, but still he is separate. He's not directly involved. is indirectly involved. So, and it is by remembering these divine activities of mine that the great devotees and yogis manage to free themselves from the wheel of birth and death. And in this way, they attain that transcendental nature of mind, which is eternal and free from all qualities. So where these great yogis and great devotees, they attain the lotus feet of the Lord by remembering these activities of mind, Vishnu is saying. And then Lakshmi is saying, O controller of all things, you are the goal of the meditation of the great yogis. Nothing can go on without you. And yet you are separate. So she is again affirming whatever Lord Vishnu just said just now. So you are the cause of creation, maintenance, and destruction of all the material universes. So now Lakshmi is asking, kindly inform me about the wonderful workings of your energies, which are so attractive. Tell me about all the different ways you and your energy interact in this material world. And then Lord Vishnu says, my dear Lakshmi, the workings of my multifold energies. So multifold. So the Lord has Sahasra Shaktis. So many different types of energies, Shaktis, millions and millions of different types. So remember, in Bhagavad Gita, we have classified them. There are so many, but we can classify them into two types. Antaranga Shakti, which is the higher spiritual energy, and the Bahiranga Shakti, which is the shadow energy or Maya. So like that, we can separate them into two categories. But still, there are many types in each of these categories. So multifold energies, and how to become free from the bonds of birth and death and attain my eternal nature. So to understand these, to understand the energy of the Lord, to understand how to be free from the cycle of birth and death, and to attain the supreme abode. So how to do all these things? So Vishnu is telling, all this can only be understood by one of pure intelligence. That means his intelligence must become purified. How it will become purified? By performing devotional service. So here he says, by who has inclination to render service unto me. So this transcendental knowledge is fully explained in the Srimad Bhagavad-Gita. So this knowledge is given in the Bhagavad Gita, but if we want to understand the real purpose, the real purport of the Bhagavad Gita, we have to render service to the Supreme Lord. Then the knowledge of the Gita will take birth in our heart. Otherwise, it will just stay and then it will go away. So we have to continue doing seva for the Lord. So there are different ways to do seva. Reading Bhagavad Gita itself every day is a seva. Chanting the names of Krishna is also a seva. So like this, if we do every day seva, at the same time, we also try to understand this Bhagavad Gita knowledge, then this knowledge will take full bloom. It will bloom fully in our intelligence. So this is Lord Vishnu telling to Parvati. Lord Vishnu telling to Lakshmi. Then Lord Vishnu says, I myself have manifested in the form of Bhagavad Gita. Please, so here he's saying, I have come in the form. So he has incarnated in the form of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, therefore, is directly an incarnation of the Lord. So that's why we worship the Lord. We worship the Bhagavad Gita. We take care of the Gita very nicely. The best way to worship Gita is by reading the Gita. So please understand that the first 5 chapters are my heads. And the next 10 chapters are my 10 arms. And the 16th chapter is my stomach. The last 2 chapters are my lotus feet. In this way, you should understand the transcendental deity of the Bhagavad Gita. So here we can understand the divine aspect of the Bhagavad Gita, how the Bhagavad Gita is not ordinary scripture. It actually is the deity form incarnate in a book form. So here the chapters are all showing how the different chapters refer to the Bhagavad Gita. All right, so then this Bhagavad Gita, Lord Vishnu continues, is the destroyer of all sins. And that intelligent man or woman who daily recites one chapter or even one sloka, so daily recites one chapter or even one sloka or one half sloka or at least one quarter sloka in one day, every day, will attain the same position as Susharma had attained. So then Lakshmi is thinking, Susharma? Who's this Susharma? So Lakshmi is asking, who was Susharma? What Varna did he belong to? So she's very eager to hear this Susharma attaining. And then he's asking, what did he attain? What destination did he attain? So this is Susharma, introducing everyone to Susharma. So in this way, Lord Vishnu begins to tell the story of Susharma, and Lord Shiva is also repeating this story to Parvati Devi. And by reading this, we are going to be benefited also. So this is the story of Susharma, the bull, and the parrot. So, and it begins like this. So Susharma was a Brahmana. He was born in a Brahmana family, but although although he was born in a Brahminical family, his family unfortunately named only Brahmana family. But the entire family was not Brahminical at all. They have long ago given up their Brahminical nature, but they don't want to, they don't perform the activities of the Brahmana, or they don't behave like Brahmanas, but they like to take the respect of Brahmanas. They like to behave in that way. I am Brahminical, and they want everybody to respect them. But at the same time, they were doing a lot of sinful activities, the whole family, including Susharma. So Susharma is born in that family. So this is what happened. So they had no Vedic knowledge, all was lost long ago, abandoned. So Susharma, being brought up in such a way, he also became very spoiled and completely degraded. And he took pleasure in doing a lot of sinful activities like hurting, himsa. He caused a lot of himsa to people, hurting others. I'm sorry, I think someone is not muted. Okay, I'll just mute you, Mataji. So temporarily, okay, don't mind me. All right, so besides doing a lot of sinful activities, like he was very greedy. He used to do many things. He will not perform acts of charity. He will not, because there are do's and don'ts. So both also he will not do. So he will not perform any pious activities. He will not take care of guests when they come to his house. He doesn't give charity. So, and he will spend his time drinking alcohol, liquor, and eating flesh foods like mamsa. So this is how he used to live. In this way, he passed his life. And what he would do to survive, he would go to the forest and collect different types of leaves. And these different types of leaves from the forest, he will sell them in the market. And this way, he'll collect money. So one day that Susharma had gone to the garden of a particular sage. There's a sage living somewhere near the forest. He went to his garden because he wanted to collect special medicinal leaves. And then while he was, and he did it at night because he didn't want the sage to know that he was taking these leaves. So while he was going, suddenly in the garden, a snake came and the snake bit him. And then after he was bitten, it was a poisonous snake. So he was alone. Nobody was there to save him. So eventually he died. And then when he died, that wasn't the end of the story. So life doesn't end at death. So what happened? He found himself cast into different types of hells. So he had to go through the different types of hells and go and suffer all the different torture to atone for the different sinful activities that he had committed in his life. So for lying, for intoxication, for drinking alcohol, and for gambling, and for killing, and meat eating, and causing harm and injury to other living creatures. So in this way, all these different sins, he had to go through punishment in hell. And after going through the different types of hells in different bodies, then still at the end of all of that, he was put back into Bhuloka, and here he took the birth of a bull. So this bull, and his life, and the life of this bull was such that he was owned by a very cruel man, and this cruel man was a cripple. He was a cripple and also a cruel man, and he used to make this bull carry a lot of heavy loads every day. He used to work very hard. So every day from morning to evening, he would work very, very hard, and he'll carry all kinds of heavy things, and in the service of this crippled man who was his master. So like that, he lived his life. He was middle-aged, and then he became slightly older. And then one day, the crippled man, he put a lot of heavy piles of load on the bull's back, and he was forcing the bull to carry extra heavy burden. So while he was carrying this, he became almost like he couldn't breathe very well already. And then suddenly he just collapsed. This is the bull, Susharma, who became the bull. So he collapsed. He collapsed and fell down. And after he collapsed, people who were watching nearby, they all rushed towards this bull. Oh, a bull collapsed with all the burden. And out of compassion, they came and they felt sorry for the bull. Oh, you see this bull, he carried so much of heavy burden. He worked so hard. And then his master gave him so much of work. Now he is collapsed out of exhaustion. So they felt sorry for him. And the villagers, there was a senior village man, he said, okay, let me, I feel sorry for this bull. Let me, if I had done any good pious activities in my life, let me share some of these pious activities, the credits to this bull. Let me give these credits away to this bull. So he was trying to give charity to the bull. You can also give your pious credits. Like if you have done some good credits, good activities, you can tell, let this person take this pious credits, let him enjoy it. So seeing this man giving this pious credits to this bull, others also decided to do the same because they also felt very compassionate. So they also gave their pious credits. And in that assembly, there was one lady. So this lady was a prostitute. She was a prostitute of the village area. And she also saw what was happening. And she was a kind prostitute. So when she saw how the others were giving their pious credits, then the lady thought, the prostitute was thinking, I'm a prostitute. I don't think I have many pious credits, but still I feel sorry for the bull. So if at all there are any pious credits which I have done in my life, let it also go to this bull. So she thought that way. So then what happened? This bull, the soul, after this bull died, Susharma, the same person, again he went back to Yamaraj. So, and when he met Yamaraj, this time Yamaraj told him, okay, now you are free from your reactions from your previous sinful life. So you don't have to suffer all this anymore. You are now free to take birth again in Bhuloka in the family of a Brahmana. And the Brahmana was surprised. Oh, I was under the impression that I have a lot more to go some more. I thought, is it finished? Then Yamaraj said, no, actually, your sins had a lot more to go. You're right. But because the prostitute gave you her blessings and the pious credits from the prostitute came to you, due to that pious credit of that particular prostitute, so much of mountains of your sins have been destroyed. So then the Brahmana was very surprised. Oh, okay. And then later, he took birth again in Bhuloka, and he took birth in a pious family, a pious Brahminical family who are very respected and were very learned in Vedic knowledge. And at the same time, since birth, this Brahmana, Susharma, in his previous life, he was given the blessing to remember his previous lives. So he could remember what happened to him as a bull. He could remember that in his previous life he was a bull, and he could also remember how he had suffered in his in a little bit. Like he could remember, not fully. He could remember a little bit about how he had suffered in hell. Not so much, because that will be very traumatic. But sometimes he would have nightmares. And he could also remember that in his previous life he was Susharma. So he grew up very pious, very in try to follow the Vedic sacrifices and all the duties and everything. And yet he was not satisfied. He thought, I must find out what is this that the prostitute did that completely saved me, that even other people's pious activity couldn't save me. The prostitute's pious activity saved me from so much of sin. What did she do? So, and somehow Yamaraj had given him the knowledge of where the prostitute is living. So she was still alive during this time. So he grew up and everything, but the prostitute, so he knew where she was, and he decided to go and search for her. So after he searched for her, he found her in a particular village, and then he asked her. This prostitute by that time was a bit old already. She was an old lady, because it took some time ago. So then he told her, oh lady, do you remember in previous many years ago, there was a bull which carried a heavy load and then it collapsed and died, and you gave a blessing to that bull to give your pious activity. And now, and then he's telling, believe it or not, I am that bull who again took this birth. Thanks to you, all my sinful activities were removed, and I was able to take birth in this life. And I'd like to know, what did you do? What pious activity did you do? I want to know what is that. If just that alone was able to give me this kind of relief, by performing that sincerely, what more can I achieve? So please tell me. Then the prostitute said, well, I don't really know what I did in my previous life. I don't really know what I did earlier in my life, but I have a feeling that it is something to do with this parrot which I had. So I have a parrot. So why don't you come with me? I will show you, I'll introduce you to this parrot of mine. So this was the parrot. So then they all went to see the parrot, and then the parrot was able to speak. So they asked this parrot, oh, what is this? How is it? What have you been speaking to this lady? Okay. And then the parrot will say, she suddenly could start speaking. The parrot previously wasn't speaking to the lady. So the prostitute was saying to Susharma that actually this parrot would be reciting a particular verse every day. I got this parrot, I bought this parrot from the market, and then this parrot was able to speak. And I didn't teach anything to the parrot, but the parrot was automatically speaking certain verses. And by hearing these verses, I feel very peaceful. I feel like, my consciousness every day, day after day, my consciousness started changing. So although previously I was a prostitute, after hearing this parrot so many times, my sinful tendencies left me, and I have given up that profession of being a prostitute. And now I'm just trying my best to be a proper spiritual person, the prostitute was telling. And then the parrot started speaking. Actually, I can, whatever I spoke to you, I will, before I tell you what I was speaking, what is that pious credit, let me tell you my life. Let me tell you how I became to be a parrot in this life. So he told both of them were surprised. Oh, this parrot can speak directly to us. So then this parrot started telling the story. Previously, I also had been a very learned Brahmana. just like how you are now a very learned Brahmana. I was a very learned Brahmana. I knew the Brahmin, the Vedas. I knew the Brahmanas, the Samhita section of the Vedas very well. I used to do a lot of karma kanda activities, fruitive ritualistic activities. I was expert in rituals. But I was very proud. And I was a proud Brahmana, and because I was so proud, I used to insult other Brahmanas. And also I became very, very jealous. I cannot tolerate if somebody else would be glorified or something. So I was a very jealous person. And then after I died, due to my sins, I was also cast into different hells. And after a long time of suffering, I achieved the body of this parrot. So I took a birth as a child, parrot. But unfortunately, due to my sinful activities, my mother and father died while I was still a baby, just hatched from the egg. A baby. My father and mother had died. And while I was lying on the hot sand, just a hatchling, the egg was broken, just a hatchling, hardly any feathers. I was being scorched by the hot sun in the sand, crying without any help. At that time, suddenly some sages happened to walk by. And these sages, they saw me, and then they took pity out of me, and they took me back to their ashram. And they kept me in a cage, and they fed me food. So the sages came and they took me, and in this way I was kept in the ashram of the sages. So in the ashram of the sages, there were some children who regularly would come and play with me. So, and I happened to be in the same area where the children will also be studying. And here the children would be reciting a particular verse. They will be reciting the chapter 1 of the Bhagavad-Gita. So while they are reciting the chapter 1 of the Bhagavad-Gita, I will also hear, and they will also teach me how to recite, because I'm a parrot can recite verses. So I could also recite this chapter 1 of the Bhagavad-Gita. But at that time, I did not know what I was thinking, because I was just a parrot. I was a dumb parrot. I couldn't remember my past life. I couldn't remember anything. I was just a dumb animal, and I was simply repeating whatever they told me. Then one day, a thief came to that ashram and stole many things. And one of the things he stole was me. He stole me. He saw me as a beautiful parrot. He said, "Wow, so nice. I can get a lot of money from selling you." And then he took me from the ashram and he sold me to the market. And that is where I was bought by this lady, the prostitute. And in this way, I would be reciting this first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's only now that I'm able to remember my past life when you came. So suddenly I'm able to remember everything. And this is what I've been speaking, the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And by hearing this first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, this prostitute developed piety, her sins became purified. And simply by her giving this as a gift to that bull, Susharma, the bull's entire sins were removed. So that was how he was able to be free from all those situations. So in this way, all of them were amazed. So the prostitute and also Susharma, they were very amazed to hear the story. And in this way, they decided to, okay, if that just accidentally doing all this, even hearing like that was able to save me from so much of danger, I will now take this path very seriously. So both of them started reciting Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, daily. In fact, they started chanting it every day, constantly. And Lord Vishnu concludes the story to Parvati. So in this way, Lord Vishnu says, by reciting the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that parrot had become completely pure eventually in his life. And by hearing that recitation, that prostitute also became completely pure. And by receiving some of the pious results of that recitation, Susharma also benefited and became pure. So his intelligence and all became purified. So therefore, Lord Vishnu concludes this story to Parvati, to Lakshmi Devi, and Lord Shiva also tells Parvati, in this way, the fruit of hearing this particular story today, anyone who recites or who hears or studies the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita will very easily cross over the ocean of material miseries and attain the service of the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. So this is the phalan. The phalan means fruit. Shruti phalan. The fruit of this, of understanding this particular story, which comes in the Padma Purana. So, right. So now we have completed the story. So it's 8:40. Let us quickly go through any lessons that we have learned from this story. Is there any particular point which struck you, which made an impression upon you that you would like to clarify or discuss, or just mention any particular lessons we are learning from the story? Anyone? Nothing? Nothing that strikes you? Okay, never mind. If probably you're still thinking about the story. Okay, so some of the lessons that we can learn is, number one, justice can transcend lifetimes. So here is something very interesting also. This is for us to, it begins with the understanding that we are souls, that life doesn't end with this body. So this story illustrates that fact. How it's not the end after we die. It goes on. There is life after life after life after life after life, which we have to go on again and again in this material world. And not all of that will be nice. Sometimes you're going to go through some very difficult situations, or we may be born in a good situation. So therefore, if we perform some sinful activities, then it may not come in that particular life, but it will be born again in the next life after that. So we may have to bear the consequences in different lifetimes. So justice can transcend different lifetimes. So that's one point which we can understand. So we also heard some things about sinful activity. What can be considered sinful activity? So if you study the life of Susharma in his previous life, how he was very sinful. So we can understand some of the aspects of sinful activity. Basically, he was, lying, he was doing basic stuffs. We already understood that. And then we also understood about hell, Yamaraj, how Yamaraj is the superintendent of hell, and hell is mainly there to it's like a correction facility, is to make the person repent for that sinful activity. And after that, it's not forever. One doesn't languish in hell forever, like how the Abrahamic religions say. Because then what's the point of hell, isn't it? If one is able to, if one doesn't never comes out of hell, then that will indicate as if God was a very vengeful person. But that's not the case. It's just a temporary punishment. And then after that, one comes out. And then we also heard about the culture of, from these stories, there are many things we can understand. We can understand points, philosophy. We can also learn culture. So culture of blessings. So this is a very nice culture, the culture of sharing our blessings with others. So we can also do that for departed forefathers or parents. That's how, when people die, we can perform activities which will benefit, and the merit of these activities can be used to benefit the others. We can even, when somebody is sick, we can chant for them, for example. We can do pious activities for their benefit, like that. Culture of blessings. This is in a Vedic situation. And we also we could understand also that animal life is also part of that justice. So suffering in hell alone is not the only thing. Taking birth as animals is also part of that suffering. We are continuing that suffering. So we can understand all plant life or animal life is also continuity of the suffering that we have to go through in order to clear our bad karma. So there is this side of the problem. And then we can also understand the complexity of karma, how karma is, we begin to get glimpses of how karma is very complex. So we will learn more about karma in one of our special topics, the next special topics, which we will give later on, right? So here we can just understand here and there some points we can pick up, and then if we have questions, we can clarify this later on. Okay, but there's one very important point in this story. At which point did the fate of all three of them suddenly change? Particularly for this, basically the prostitute and Susharma and the parrot. At which point did in this entire story, their fate completely changed from bad fate to a good fate? Anyone would like to say? So if you remember, it happened when the sages came and saved the parrot. Because the parrot's fate was also very bad. The parrot was suffering, and then Susharma was also suffering. It all came, Susharma was suffering, and he was saved by the prostitute. And the prostitute was given good, it was not her credits. She got good credits simply by hearing what the parrot was saying. And how did the parrot get even a good credit? He was also suffering initially. So what changed all three of their lives, beginning from the parrot? The incident that changed the parrot's life was meeting the sage. How when the parrot met the sages taught the parrot Bhagavad-Gita. So simply by association of saintly personalities, many great benefits or blessings can be received. So that's the purpose of saintly personalities. So saintly personalities is in the culture of in India, in India previously, in Bharat Bhumi, saintly personalities will roam about like as if they were beggars. And the purpose they were going about was simply to benefit the people. So that, if somebody gives them something, they become benefited. If someone does a good turn, a favor, or some kind of service for saintly people, they get so much of pious activities. And that's the idea behind it. So therefore, by their association, everybody who comes in contact with saintly persons, they get purified. So in the same way, the parrot got blessings and purification. Able to hear they get in contact with Bhagavad Gita, because these are the people who carry the words of God, Bhagavad Gita and all with them. So like this is called Agyata Sukruti. This is a very important word which we will be saying many times throughout our various classes. Agyata Sukruti. Agyata Sukruti. Sukruti means credits. Agyata means without us doing anything, simply by very simple service, unknowingly, we get special spiritual blessings. This is called Agyata Sukruti. So the parrot received Agyata Sukruti simply by association with the saintly persons. He was able to hear Bhagavad Gita and learn Bhagavad Gita. And the prostitute received Agyata Sukruti simply by hearing that recitation from the parrot. And Susharma received Agyata Sukruti simply by the prostitute giving away her piety to the bull. So this is Agyata Sukruti. So Agyata Sukruti means somehow unknowingly somewhere someone has done a service of spiritual service. So that is agyata sukriti. So, that means they have served either somehow they have accidentally spoken Bhagavad Gita, or they must have heard Bhagavad Gita, or they must have spoken the names of the Lord, or in some way, served a devotee of the Lord. So these are all spiritual credits. So therefore, we will learn about them later on in the special topic of karma, how there are 3 different types of activities. There is pious activity, there is sinful activity, and there is spiritual activity. So spiritual activity is different from pious activity. So we will hear that difference later on when we talk about in later topics. Okay, so right, so now we have finished that story, right? If you have any questions on that story, maybe while it's still fresh with you, you'd like to raise it. Otherwise, I can go on to the Bhagavad Gita summary, and if you prefer, you can also ask the questions at the end of the session.
Prabhu, this is Rajan here, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, just to clear my doubts in respect of the karma pertaining to animals. You had mentioned that animal lives is rather difficult, and therefore, just being an animal, you're actually paying off your karma. Huh?
Yes.
Now, does that mean that the animals do not incur new karma?
Yes. The animals do not, yeah, they don't incur karma.
That means they're merely cleansing throughout.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
So it's like if a tiger comes and eats a brahmana, the tiger doesn't get the sin of killing a brahmana.
Right.
So that's his nature. So we have to understand the situation and then avoid the tiger. Okay. So yes, you're right.
And my second question, Prabhu, is you're also in reference to the prostitute. You had mentioned her sinful activities. Why do you consider prostitution as being sinful, Prabhu?
Okay, so this is basically what is mentioned in scripture. So chastity is a very important thing, and for a lady to uphold chastity is piety, and to not uphold chastity is considered sinful. So prostitution is considered sinful. It's one of the more degraded type of activities which were done. So in that sense, we derive our concept of what is sinful and what is not sinful from scripture. Is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So then anything else before, or I could just continue with it? Let me check the chat. Okay, so thank you for that question, Rajan Prabhu. Okay, so now let us just continue with the chapter 1 Bhagavad Gita. So in level 2, I will give a summary of the entire chapter 1. And the understanding is that we read the book on our own, because I've already covered this in chapter 1, in level 1. And now we would like to go deeper. So it's better that if all of us read the Bhagavad Gita on our own, go through the verses, the translation, the purport, and note down if there are anything which we're not clear about. And my purpose here for this chapter 1 is just to give an overview so that we can give a, it's more like a guidance to help us to focus back again. So what were the main topics of the Bhagavad Gita? Okay, so I'll just go through. So chapter 1 Bhagavad Gita, if you remember, it was called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, or observing the armies of the battlefield. So Arjuna Vishada means the yoga is when Arjuna was put into illusion for the purpose of Bhagavad Gita to be spoken. How Krishna, the Supreme Lord, uses his devotees as instruments for his execution of his will. So it began with verse 1, if you remember, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveda Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra's anxiety. So Dhritarashtra was very anxious. Why he was anxious? Because he wanted to know the outcome. He knows battle is going to happen, and he wanted to know, will they fight? And if they fight, will my sons lose? So he was worried, he was anxious. So in here, many things are revealed. The mind of Dhritarashtra was revealed, how he was being partial, how despite being the king of the entire Kuru dynasty, he separated his own sons as Kuru, and he did not include the Pandavas as also Kurus, although the Pandavas were the rightful heir. So that was seen. And we could also understand how, and from here, we could also derive how in the beginning itself, who is going to be the victor. Because Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. So it begins with Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, Dharma. So Dharma is the land of Kurukshetra is a great pilgrimage site. It's a holy site. And certainly it's going to support those who are dharmic. And the side of Dharma will be victorious. So he was worried about that. So here's the first indication. And then after that, from verses 1.2 to 1.13, if you read, you will find the nature of Duryodhana. So Duryodhana's character is revealed. So in the beginning, Dhritarashtra's character is revealed, and a hint about victory is revealed. And now we will find about Duryodhana's diplomacy. Now in level 1, I did not cover Duryodhana's diplomacy. It was 1.2 to 1.13. So here you will find how Duryodhana, he was watching the armies. You know, Duryodhana's side has more armies. It's like the ratio was 11 to 7. The Kaurava side outnumbered the Pandava side 11 to 7, like that. But still, he was afraid because he saw how expertly the Pandava side they have prepared their army. Because he was very confident. Duryodhana was always overconfident, and he was overconfident for three reasons actually. One is because he had a very powerful person who was his friend and who was willing to do anything for him, even though that whatever he was doing is wrong. That person is Karna. So because he had Karna as a friend, he was a bit, he had the courage to do all the many bad, terrible things. Because otherwise he knew only Karna could match the Pandavas in fighting. He couldn't fight them. So with that, he wanted to immediately, he captured Karna's heart. He saw Karna was having no family, and then he decided to immediately, I will give family to Karna. Immediately I'll give him kingdom. Immediately I'll give him wealth. I'll give him all kinds of facilities, and I will win his heart. He saw how Karna was alone, dejected, and insulted in a public assembly, and then he saw his opportunity. Here is a powerful personality. I can quickly get him into my side and create a rivalry against the Pandavas. So Karna was manipulated into the situation by Duryodhana. So Duryodhana is seen here as a great manipulator, very diplomatic, very good in manipulation of people, how to take advantage of people. So this is the character of Duryodhana. And similarly, in the battle, right in front, he was going to do another manipulation. The second reason why he was very confident was because his father, Dhritarashtra, was very weak-hearted, and he was completely enamored by Duryodhana. Whatever Duryodhana will say, the father, Dhritarashtra, will eventually, initially he may say no, but eventually he will say yes. So Duryodhana knew about this, and he really exploited this to the maximum. So Dhritarashtra was so blind. He was blind in his eyes and he was also blind spiritually and also blind in terms of Dharma. So though he was given so much of good instructions, but in the end, sentimentalism and attachment to his sons would win over every other argument. And Duryodhana knew this. He tested it many, many times, and each time he was successful. So he knew this very well. So that's the second reason. The third reason Duryodhana was very confident was also because besides Karna, he had an even more powerful personality. Two personalities actually, who were very much, who are very powerful. Number one is Bhishma, and the second one is Dronacharya. So those two were very, very powerful. Bhishma Dev is undefeatable. So is Dronacharya. And Bhishma Dev cannot even be killed. And so in this way, the glories of Bhishma and Drona are very great. And they knew, and Duryodhana knew that Bhishma and Drona will never leave the kingdom. They will never, they have sworn to support the kingdom only. Because Bhishma had taken a vow that he will never go against the Rajyam, the kingdom. He will always support the throne. And Drona was so indebted to the king that he would not be able to go against, because Dronacharya was a Brahmana. So, and there's a story behind Dronacharya. We won't go into that now. But Dronacharya, he was also purchased with wealth and facilities and servitude. So in this way, they felt gratitude. Drona was too much carried over with gratitude for saving his situation that he just could not leave the Kauravas. So that was, even though it was adharma, he knew it was adharma, but still he got illusioned due to various reasons. We will not discuss those reasons now. But anyway, because of Drona and Bhishma and Dhritarashtra and Karna, Duryodhana became very confident that he thought victory will be his. But he always knew that Drona and Bhishma had a very soft spot for the Pandavas. He knew that Drona and Bhishma are only fighting simply because they had no choice, because they have been checkmated. So and like that, and at the same time, he thought that Drona and Bhishma might become lenient towards the Pandavas. That out of sentiment and all that, they may not execute their duty fully to his service. So therefore, Duryodhana took this opportunity to go to Dronacharya, and then he told Dronacharya, "Look, Dronacharya, your very intelligent disciple, Dhritarashtra, who is the general in the Pandava side, he has so expertly arranged his armies." So indirectly, he was trying to hint to Dronacharya, you should not be so lenient. So you see, you were lenient to them, and now they are using your knowledge, the knowledge that you gave them, and they are using it against you and against us. So you better be not lenient. Indirectly, he was saying. Of course, he wouldn't speak like that directly to Drona, because Drona was his superior. But this is how he was manipulating Drona. So in Drona, he understood what Duryodhana was saying, but he already gave his word, so he couldn't turn back. He was a Brahmana. He was following his Brahminical principles, so he would not turn back. And then after that, he went to Bhishma. He went to Bhishma and told Bhishma, like initially he was supposed to address Bhishma first, because Bhishma was the general of the entire army. So by right, superiority goes to Bhishma. But Duryodhana was so intelligent. He knew that if I glorify Drona, so he started glorifying Drona also. So he knew that if I glorify Drona first, Bhishma will not take offense, because Drona was Brahmana, whereas Bhishma was Kshatriya. So Bhishma will not become upset if a Brahmana is glorified, even though if Bhishma is the general. All this kind of mentality, Duryodhana he was very expert. He was an expert psychologist. He knew how to understand different people and manipulate them very well. So we could see, you can read about this from the Bhagavad Gita, verses 1.2 to 1.13 about Duryodhana's diplomacy. So this is Duryodhana's character, how he was so crooked, expert in manipulation. So we can see, we can try to contrast, so I mentioned all this already. So we can try to contrast Duryodhana's character with Arjuna's character. So when Arjuna was in illusion, what came out from him? Was he trying to manipulate? Was he trying to get the kingdom? Was it selfishness in any way? So even though Arjuna was put into illusion, what came out from Arjuna was only compassion. He was willing to give up everything for the sake of the others, even though they were wrong. So he was not thinking about anything about himself. Whereas Duryodhana, you can see how he was only concerned about his pride, his gain, and how he was so determined to wipe them out. He was not willing to even give them a spot of land to drive the pin. That was Duryodhana's character, right? So we can see the contrast. Anyway, it goes on. This entire thesis one can write in this, but we don't have time for that. So that is Duryodhana's diplomacy, 1.2 to 1.13. And then signs of victory, 1.14 to 1.20. So probably some of you could remember signs of victory. It's been so many weeks already. So months have passed since we talked about the signs of victory. So anyway, we don't have too much time, so I'll just mention, the Kapi Dwaja, the flag of victory where Hanuman is in the flag, Gandiva bow, and then Dharma Kshetre, the holy place of pilgrimage, Madhava, Krishna being on the side of the Pandavas, being the most important sign of victory, the husband of the goddess of fortune, right, Madhava. And then also the chariot, special chariot given by Indra, Agni, sorry. And then also the blowing of the transcendental conch shells, if you remember. So these are all signs of victory. So I've listed them here. Okay. Dharma Kshetre, Madhava, chariot, Divyam Shanka, Kapi Dwaja, Gandiva bow. Okay. So like that, these were the signs of victory. So the lessons we could also learn from this chapter is, number one, adharma is never an option. One should always be righteous in whichever situation. One should never think of unrighteousness. So that is very important point. We can see here, Duryodhana was supporting the side of non-righteousness, and whoever who was with him, even though it was Bhishma, even though it was Drona, even though they were Brahmanas and they were very great personalities, no matter who it was, if they were to support non-righteousness, adharma, they will be destroyed. So it will never, it never pays. So that's why purposely Bhishma and Drona were put on the other side. Just to show, even if you were unconquerable, even if the number of armies was, there was every sign for, in one could say, there were every signs of victory for the Kauravas, materially speaking. Materially speaking, the Kauravas outnumber the Pandavas. Materially speaking, the Kauravas have so many different armies also, so many different personalities. They had Karna, they had Bhishma, they had Drona. In impossible odds, the Pandavas were facing impossible odds in fighting people like Bhishma and Drona. Yet, despite so many materialistic signs of victory on the Kaurava side, we can understand how ultimately Dharma, or the purpose of the Lord, is always ever victorious. It may not happen immediately, but in the end, it will happen. So then after that, verses 1.21 to 1.26 is about viewing the army, setting the scene. So Krishna sets the scene. He prepares the illusion to put on the Arjuna so that the scene is set, so that Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. So what happens? He inspires Arjuna to start asking, "Oh Krishna, please drive me to the center of this battlefield so I can see who all have come to fight with me." So then Krishna directly brings him smack right in front of Bhishma and Drona, the two personalities in the Kaurava side who Arjuna always was not comfortable when he was going to fight them. So emotionally and sentimentally, that Dronacharya and Bhishma were the weakest point in Arjuna's armor. And Krishna purposely went and put them in front of them. And then when Arjuna saw them, he was just overwhelmed and overcome with emotions. He just could not. So that was taken as the opportunity for Krishna to start speaking the Bhagavad Gita. So then, okay, so this is 1.21 to 1.26. We have already seen, how Arjuna was put in such misery. He was so disturbed emotionally, father, mother, uncle, every single type of family member was waiting to kill him. So the type of pain that he was going through was unimaginable for such a saintly personality like Arjuna. And then we saw Arjuna Vishada, how Arjuna was put into illusion, how his hands were shaking, his palms were sweating, the Gandiva was slipping, his skin was burning, he was palpitating. So all these signs of Arjuna's Vishada. And then Arjuna starts to speak. We heard about his excuses, his reasons why he did not want to fight. Remember CESDI, CESDI, right? So in chapter 1, he only gives the 4 reasons. The 5th reason he gives in the chapter 2. So he talks about compassion, how he feels that I cannot fight. How am I going to win this? So compassion was the problem. I cannot kill such great personalities. And why should I kill? Better I don't, just for getting this kingdom, better I just leave everything and go. So he gave that as an excuse, compassion as a reason. And then he thought, even if I win, I cannot enjoy this. It is not going to work out. I cannot, how can I be happy in the having kingdom which is washed with the blood of all my relatives? So no enjoyment was his reason. And then how we will be overcome by sin because we are fighting against such worshipable people such as Dronacharya and Bhishma. So that was another reason. And then he said, look at all the people who have assembled in this Mahabharata war, in this Kurukshetra. Millions and millions, hundreds and thousands and millions of people have joined in this war from all over the world. What will happen at the end? Everybody will die. So many people are going to die. And that will result in loss of destruction of the family. How? Because the leaders of the family are killed. The elders of the family are killed. And then who will protect, who will give protection to Dharma? Who will be there to protect the Dharma when all the Kshatriyas are dead? And who will protect the ladies, the women, the family, the children? And when ladies are not protected, what will happen? They will lose the ideals of ladyship. What is the ideal of ladyship? Chastity. So when chastity is lost, when they are taken advantage of and exploited by unscrupulous people, because there are no elders who are able to establish Dharma, then what will happen? Varna Shankara will take place. That means unwanted children, improper progeny unwanted children will flood the world with negative qualities. And in this way, adharma will arise. And all of this will be due to me continue to fight. So therefore, he will give that as a reason, destruction of the family. So these were all the reasons given by Arjuna. So here we can try to understand what leads to adharma and the nature of illusion. So this is called illusion. He does not understand what actually will cause adharma and what actually will not cause adharma. So therefore, we can see from Bhagavad Gita chapter 1. So in chapter 1, it doesn't talk about spiritual topics really. It talks about Dharma. Dharma is in the lower plane. It's not transcendental. It is still within the mode of goodness. So in this way, here I'm putting the sequence of what Arjuna will say. He will talk about the destruction of the family dynasty, how the family traditions are abandoned because there's no one to uphold dharma and spirituality, how in that way the family will fall into irreligion. And when the family falls into irreligion, they do not know what is dharma and what is not adharma because they do not follow scripture. And when that happens, women become polluted. So women are very important in society because they are the ones who are going to bring up children. And if the mother is not proper, the child, the dharma of the child, because the dharma of the child is brought up properly. So that's why it's very important for elders of this family to maintain spiritual practices, where the whole family will practice spiritual practices. And in this way, the tradition is passed down to the next generation. So when that happens, Varna Shankara takes rise. Varna Shankara is unwanted progeny or those who are hellish population. They create all kinds of problems. So Varna Shankara will be the reason of the rise of adharma, completely loss of dharma. So Arjuna knows all these things and he's giving this as a reason to Krishna. So actually, Krishna later on in chapter 3, he will defeat one by one. But in chapter 3, Krishna will give a very clear indication of the defeat of this excuse. This is the verse 324. Utsideyur ime loka na kuryam karma chet aham sankarasya cha karta shyam upahanyam ima prajaha. So Krishna will say, if I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds will be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So Krishna is saying, the real cause of Varna Shankara and the destruction of Dharma and the rise of Adharma is not due to you not going to fight. It will be due to you because the real cause of adharma is when the leaders of society are not following dharma properly. So you see, currently what's happening in the Mahabharata war, who are the king? The king is Dhritarashtra. And is Dhritarashtra a dharmic person? He is not a dharmic person. He has lost sight of dharma. Never mind if he is supported by Bhishma and Drona. But Bhishma and Drona never supported the adharmic activities of Dhritarashtra. They are just supporting the war. In fact, Bhishma will tell Dhritarashtra so many times, please don't do this, please don't do this. But Dhritarashtra will not listen. But nevertheless, the king of the world is Dhritarashtra and he is adharmic. And he is being controlled by Duryodhana, who is Kali Yuga's personification. Duryodhana is known as the personification of Kali Yuga. So he is completely adharmic. So the world is controlled by adharma. So if you do not fight, then who will control the world? Adharma will control the world. And do you think that family traditions and scripture and eternal religion and all this will flourish in such an environment? It will be destroyed because they are not focused towards Dharma, they are not focused towards pleasing the Supreme Lord, they are focused only towards satisfying their own selfish desires. So the focus is totally different. So all this is currently simply convenience. As long as it is convenient, they will follow. The moment it hits their selfish desires, then they will not think twice to abandon Dharma. So therefore, you are a Kshatriya and your job is to uphold Dharma. So if you do not fight Arjuna, then you are performing adharma because you are abandoning your rightful duty. If you cannot face them, who else is there to face them? So in this way, in various ways, Krishna will defeat the arguments Arjuna will present. So we can understand from chapter 1 many things. So if we deeply study, there are actually many things we can understand. One of the points also we can hear is the qualification of someone who is ready to receive Bhagavad Gita or ready to receive spiritual knowledge or ready to receive initiation. So Arjuna accepts Krishna as his guru, and in chapter 2. So from then onwards, spirituality is given in full in Bhagavad Gita. But in chapter 1, we can understand the qualifications of such a person. So a saintly person. So therefore, Arjuna was such a saintly person. So we can see Arjuna was fit to receive. Bhagavad Gita was spoken to everyone. Duryodhana was also hearing the Bhagavad Gita, but he could not benefit. Why? Because he did not have saintly qualities. So his intelligence was not pure. Remember Lord Vishnu telling to Lakshmi in the story of Susharma, one has to have pure intelligence before one is able to understand spiritual truths properly, digest them. So first of all, saintly character is needed. So what is this saintly character? So that we can try to understand in our practical aspect of today's topic. So okay, it's already 9:20. I'll take another 5 to 10 minutes, maximum 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So we are going to talk about Dharma. We are speaking about Dharma since just now. So in Sanatan Dharma, Dharma or religiosity or piety is basically is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is given an example that Dharma is like the bull, just like earth. Earth is like the cow. The mother earth sometimes takes the form of the cow. So the cow represents the earth. And in the same way, religiosity personified takes the form of a bull. So the bull and the cow. So they are together. They're supposed to be together. And just like how the bull stands on 4 legs, so Dharma also stands on 4 pillars. There are 4 pillars of Dharma. If any of these pillars are destroyed, then Dharma cannot stand. So that is the basic principle which is being taught. So what are these 4 pillars of Dharma? So these 4 pillars of Dharma are known as Satyam, Saucham, Daya, and Tapaha. So Satyam means truthfulness. So truthfulness is one of the pillars of Dharma. And Saucham means cleanliness. So cleanliness can have several things. Later we will, in our subsequent sessions, we will go into each of these topics in detail. Satyam, Saucham, Daya, and Tapa. So now I'm just giving an overview. So Satyam, Saucham means cleanliness. So we may think, oh, does that mean we have to keep a clean house? So we can think, later we will discuss. And then Daya. Daya means mercy, a merciful heart. So from Daya springs Ahimsa, right? Non-violence and many other things which come from Daya, mercy. And the 4th leg is Tapaha. Tapaha means the ability to sacrifice or the ability to follow austerity for a greater cause, to perform austerities, to do things which we don't like to do for a greater cause. Austerities and big sacrifices. So they come under the aspect of Tapa. So Satyam, Saucham, Daya, and Tapa. So in the different yugas, we have Satya Yuga, we have Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga in this current cycle. So in the beginning, in Satya Yuga, Dharma stood on all four legs. And then one by one, the legs were broken. So at the end of Satya Yuga, Tapa was broken. So who was breaking all this? Kali, the personality of Kali. The sin personified was coming and breaking these legs. So at the end of Satya Yuga, the ability to perform austerity and sacrifices to a large extent was already destroyed. So that's why meditation is no longer the practice after that, Dwapara Yuga and all that. So then in Treta Yuga, the leg of Daya, mercy, was destroyed. Compassion. So therefore, after that, fire sacrifices were no longer allowed, because in Treta Yuga, one of the main ways of spiritual realization was through fire sacrifice. And at that time, they will sacrifice animals and they will chant mantras, and these animals will get a better destination and all that. So understanding that it will be exploited and having Daya, mercy, already being lost. So fire sacrifices were considered, animal sacrifices at least, were completely banned at the end of Treta Yuga. So Daya was destroyed. And then at the end of Dwapara Yuga, Saucham was also destroyed. So there used to be elaborate temple worship. And for that, you need Saucham very strongly. So at the end of Dwapara, in the beginning of Kali, Saucham was no longer present in full. So that was no longer the main way of spirituality. So therefore comes Satyam. Satyam alone lasted. So until in Kali Yuga, Satyam alone began, but that also is being destroyed. At the end of Kali Yuga, Satyam will be completely destroyed. So Tapa is already gone, Daya is already gone, Saucham is already gone. What we see, of, if at all there is any austerity, mercy, or cleanliness, it is simply a shadow of what it was. So Satyam is also rapidly being destroyed. So 5,000 years down the line, you can see now a lot of things are being destroyed. There's already a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of dupliciousness, Duryodhana-like mentality, which is going on. So truth alone triumphs. Mundaka Upanishad says 3.1.6. So truth is the seed of all the other legs. So every other leg cannot stand without Satyam. So that is the last leg which is standing. And this is a very important point. So today we will just briefly talk about Satyam. So what destroys Satyam? What are the types of activities that destroys Satyam? So the scriptures say the main activity, there are many sub-activities, but all the sub-activities are vested, are all taking shelter of one main activity which destroys Satyam. So what is that? So that is called gambling. Gambling or taking unnecessary risks. So it is said that gambling destroys truthfulness. So this is also documented. So people gamble with lives, people gamble with various things, not just money. People gamble with livelihood, people gamble with dharma, people gamble with many things. They take unnecessary risk. And what is the root of gambling? Gambling is carried out to satisfy selfish desires. So therefore, lust is the root of gambling. And for the sake of lust, one is able to perform any kind of hypocrisy in order to support that. So even modern psychology accepts this. The interesting thing about gamblers, if you study gamblers and their psychology, is their manipulation, and how they manipulate is different than most people. They live a life of manipulation. So propaganda, manipulation, cheating, lying, hypocrisy, these kind of things you will see in this world. This is very, very rampant. The government manipulates the citizens. So, and the leaders of society manipulate the citizens. Even spirituality is being manipulated. Every single thing is being used, and it's meant to lull the population, manipulate the population. That's why even Karl Marx says, right? Religion is the opium of the masses, he used to say. And religion has been used to manipulate the people to get what the leaders of society want to achieve. And in this way, many things are being done. Education is being manipulated. So all of this falls under the category of gambling, manipulation, or in other words, manipulation or gambling. So therefore, one who is committed towards spirituality, before we are able to understand higher truths of spirituality, we must be committed to Satyam, truthfulness. And it begins by us completely rejecting hypocrisy and completely rejecting gambling of any form. So therefore, this is what are things. And you can see the Mahabharata war itself happened. One of the main reasons is due to gambling, right? How gambling had took place at the insistence of Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana manipulated Dhritarashtra to go and tell the Pandavas to come and gamble with him. He knew that if he invited them, they will not come because Pandavas don't gamble. But if Dhritarashtra told them to come, then Yudhisthira, who will always follow the instructions of his seniors, he will force to come. So in this way, Duryodhana manipulated Dhritarashtra and they forced them to gamble. And due to this gambling, Draupadi was disrobed in public in such a assembly. The leader of this is the main assembly of the world. In the assembly of the world, imagine like the parliament of the world. In the parliament of the world, one of the greatest acts of adharma, which was the disrobing of a chaste lady during her period, that took place. So therefore, Krishna is telling Arjuna, have you forgotten all these things, Arjuna? So therefore, do you not remember? Bhishma was there, Drona was there, and they did not say a word. Though they were crying, but they did not go against Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra, completely under the sway of Duryodhana, did not even budge. So therefore, that is what will happen. So this is very important point. Today we have covered Satyam. So next time we will cover other topics. So we will end here. Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, anything, we can say something. Anyone wants to share anything, raise any points? I hope it was clear, whatever we spoke.
Yes, Prabhu, this is Rajani again.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, sorry to bother you.
No. Happy to have questions.
Okay, Prabhu, there's a lot of, has always been said that the Pandavas have always been the virtuous ones. Mm. And the Kauravas were the nasty ones. Mm. But then looking at Yudhisthira himself, he was a compulsive gambler. The entire war happened because of his wanting to gamble. And we just learned today that gambling is actually, that's the one that destroys Satyam.
Yeah.
And he gambled to such an extent that he gambled all his siblings, including his wife. Mm. I mean, how could that be any act of virtue on the part of Yudhisthira? And knowing Bhimasena was such a bully, was constantly bullying. How does that act as Dharma? And even during the war of Kurukshetra, where Karna was arrowed when he was defenseless, by Arjuna. And the reason why I believe that Duryodhana was angered by Draupadi was, I think, when she insulted him. Yep. When he slipped in Indraprastha, yep. and she called him, like the father is blind and so are you. I mean, I think that is a terrible insult for anybody.
Okay.
So how do you reconcile these things,
okay.
Prabhu? How do you explain this?
Thank you for the question,
Thank
Rajan.
you.
Okay. All right. So firstly, we have to hear this from authoritative versions, because nowadays it's the fashion, especially in South India, to take scriptures and to distort scriptures and to present it in the way they want it to be presented. Because people have, they will find, oh, it's getting boring. Arjuna always, Pandavas are always so let us have a new twist so that we can attract more people to suddenly come and watch our serial. So like that, they have Karna as the main, especially in South India, you will find many of this, it's not only Mahabharata, they have also taken Ramayana and they have made Ramayana, Rama as the villain and Ravana as the hero. In fact, there was one book written like that, and that person actually won an award in South India for best book of the year or something like that from that government. So like that, it happens. This is important for us to understand. That's the reason. Firstly, we have to know the proper authority of the scriptures. Like for example, when you mentioned that Draupadi was saying that like the father, similarly you are also blind. So that was not true, because if you read the actual version of the Mahabharata scripture in Sanskrit, you will find that that conversation didn't take place. That is an embellishment which was created later on by authors. So what she did do was she laughed. She did laugh. So when Duryodhana slipped and fell, not slipped, he actually saw the lake. He thought that lake was actually land. So he stepped on that. It was so wondrous. And then when he stepped on that, he sunk into it and then he got wet. So then Draupadi was laughing at that. So she couldn't help herself. It is nevertheless a fault. So the Pandavas are being portrayed as not perfect characters. So there are faults in them, like Bhima sometimes have certain faults. Even that's his nature. So in certain ways, even Bhima sometimes he would also say certain harsh things to even Yudhisthira at some point of time. So the idea here is the Pandavas were not perfect people, because they were supposed to represent all the society. They are supposed to represent everyone, but at the same time, they were what was very much highlighted in the Pandavas were their dedication to righteousness. For example, if you were to ask, if you brought up the point of, actually you brought up many points. It will be a very long discussion to address all the points today. But like, for example, Karna, there's an entire book written on Karna, how your point was like, oh, Karna is being unfairly shot. But Karna deserved what he got. There were many things which Karna did, which the authors would, conveniently ignore. And in this way, we will discuss them. It takes a long time to discuss them. In fact, an entire book has been written to counter this point about what you just mentioned about Karna. But for today, I will just mention about Yudhisthira, since we are talking about gambling, right? So the proper understanding is, Yudhisthira, firstly, is an incarnation of Yamaraj himself, one of the expansions of Dharmaraja. So Yamaraj is known as Dharmaraja. So Dharmaraja cannot go wrong. He is the Lord of law. So, and therefore we can understand where he's coming from. Okay, that's one thing. Secondly, Yudhishthira Maharaj, though he had an inclination to gamble, but he did not want to gamble. It was not because he wanted to gamble. How it happened was, Duryodhana he came up with this idea to steal away the kingdom. So if you want to talk about injustices, we can list down one by one all the injustices done by the Kauravas and all the different horrible things done by the Kauravas, and we can compare with the perceived or alleged injustices of the Pandavas, and we will see that whatever the Pandavas have done very much pales in comparison to what the Kauravas did. But as I said, the Pandavas were not perfect. So they had their natural human inclinations. They were taking the role of human beings. So there were one or two mistakes which they may have done. So this is just to show, but nevertheless, it's to indicate that despite the mistakes, they were repentful. They repented the mistakes which they performed, and at the same time, they never lost their dedication towards virtue. So the example for Yudhisthira here is, Yudhisthira took a vow. He was Dharma Raja, and he was very determined to follow scriptural rule to the dot. And one of the things he wanted to do was, he will never go against seniors. He will never cross. Because once during the Rajasuya Yagya, when he performed the Rajasuya Yagya, one of the sages came and gave a prophecy to him. They told the prophecy that due to an action which you will perform, Yudhisthira, O king, that time Yudhisthira was king of Indraprastha. And then they told him, due to one action which you will perform, this will cause the great war, which will destroy the entire kingdom. Many people will die. So as soon as Yudhisthira heard this, he took immediate vow. The vow was, number one, why do wars happen? Wars happen because, number one reason is because one doesn't follow authority. So therefore, he vowed, at this point, I will never cross authority. So, and then he took another vow. I forgot the second vow, but the first vow is pertaining to this point. So because I will never cross authority, and everybody knew about this. So, and Duryodhana knew about this. And that's the reason he knew that if he invited the Pandavas to come and gamble, they will not come. So even though Yudhisthira had this inclination, because this is also another thing we should understand, is that the nature of Kshatriyas. Now Yudhisthira was a Kshatriya. And Kshatriya, one of the Dharma of Kshatriya is, when they are challenged, a Kshatriya cannot back down from a challenge. So if they do, then they are considered impotent and they will be made fun of and all that. So it is also not their Dharma. So if a challenge is made, so if I challenge you to a game, or if I challenge you to something, they have to answer. So that is one nature. But nevertheless, Duryodhana took advantage. He knew that if I invited the Pandavas to come and gamble, they will not come. Bhima will not come. Arjuna will not come. None of them will come. But Yudhisthira will come, because if I tell Dhritarashtra to invite him. Because if Dhritarashtra gives the command, Yudhisthira cannot refuse. So if you read the story of the Mahabharata, the verses, it will indicate how Dhritarashtra sent this command through Vidura. Because Dhritarashtra also knew that if I say, it might not sit well, let me send Vidura. So he commanded Vidura, who he knew that the Pandavas have great respect. And this Vidura, out of no choice, he went to tell the Pandavas, look, this is the plan these people are having. He knew, Yudhisthira Maharaj knew what they were planning. Vidura already told him, Dhritarashtra is planning like this. I am simply passing the message because I've been commanded. So please do what you will. And then Yudhisthira, he couldn't do anything because he already took the vow. And you can see how Yudhisthira was so attached towards upholding truthfulness. So the reason he even gambled was to uphold truthfulness. The same goes for Draupadi, right? Like how Draupadi was just to uphold the truthfulness of the word of his mother. The entire Pandavas decided to accept Draupadi as the wife. So in the same way, because he had made that vow, he had no choice but to follow whatever Dhritarashtra said. So he came. They all went to Dhritarashtra, and the Pandavas were so united. Their respect for Yudhisthira Maharaj was so great that they were willing to follow him, even though they knew that they were walking into a trap. Their mistake, the Pandavas made a mistake at that time. Their only mistake at that time was they did not think to call Krishna for help. In every other situation, they surrendered to Krishna. In every other situation. But this is also part of Krishna's plan. This is Leela, because the Mahabharata had to happen. So there had to be a way to do it. So this is also an indication to tell us any important activity we take in our life, we should take consultation. So this was the mistake. They did not consult Krishna. Krishna could have averted this. But anyway, Yudhisthira they went there and they did the gamble. They didn't want to, but then because Duryodhana, and each time they were gambling, Yudhisthira will look at the eyes of Dhritarashtra. One by one, he will give. I gamble my kingdom, my horses, my wealth, one by one. Each time he will look at Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra we know what Dhritarashtra will say? What have they won? What have they lost? So he was playing like a child. And Duryodhana was gleeful. He was gleefully enjoying this. So like that, one by one, they were losing. And still, Yudhisthira Maharaj, just to uphold this truthfulness, he knew he was trapped. He walked into this trap. There was nothing he could do now. So, but he would not give up truthfulness. So this is the nature of Dharmaraj. So that is an example of what is basically the character of Yudhisthira Maharaj. If you read Mahabharata, you will find so much of glorification about the character of Yudhisthira Maharaj. So like that, there are many points. We have to slowly mention. It's easy for them for the unscrupulous authors to come up with, to twist. It's very easy to create a twist, but to come and to explain the twist patiently, it takes time. So we will address them slowly, one by one. So time is of an essence. Next time, probably we can address Karna or what else. So like that, there are many things. Okay, Prabhu, I hope that is something which is helpful in the beginning, at least.
Thank you, Prabhu. I will always be very troubled by this, but I suppose I need to do more reading on this. But thank you so much for explanation.
Okay. So, Prabhu, I suggest that you read there's this Mahabharata. Okay, what I could do later on, I could also send you some links where there are some classes given on these topics which will address these questions.
Oh, great. That'll be great.
All right. Give me some time. I'm a bit extremely tight with my schedule.
No rush, Prabhu. I waited for.
But I'll keep in mind. I'll keep it in mind, and whenever I can, I will send this to you. Also, if you get a chance, you can read the book, the Mahabharata. I posted it in the WhatsApp group also. It's by Krishna Dharma Prabhu and Purna Prajnadas. It's written by the Sampradaya, and it's a good explanation. You can get the full picture. So it's important we can hear both sides of the view before we make the conclusion, and it will help us to understand this very well.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, very good. So, but please keep the questions coming. Don't worry if there's controversy. Don't worry if you feel this is a hard question or a troublesome question. The whole point of this is to address them one by one. There's just a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of things which have been thrown onto religion to bedevil it so that people will lose faith. So we have to systematically, one by one, uncover them, and it will take time. So I beg your patience. Thank you. Okay, so if there's nothing else, anyone else before? It's getting late, but you can also post it in your WhatsApp or message me or whatever. When the time comes, maybe one day I can just have a session just to answer all the questions. We don't cover anything else. See how. Okay, so but just let the questions come. Don't worry about asking anything, any controversial. I'm not going to take offense or anything like that. We will address them logically. Okay, thank you very much. So let us end with this. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. I'll see you all.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.